want to talk about the grace of God. 1 Corinthians 15:10. Paul said, by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace toward me was not in vain. John 16, right after he talked about Jesus becoming, or God becoming flesh, he said from his fullness, we've all received grace upon grace. So we've all experienced grace. We've all wanted grace. But you know where we come up short? Exhibiting grace. Don't we? Don't we? I mean, you know, it's funny. We just came through an election year that was anything but full of grace. I mean, what? I mean, it's just, I don't know, people arguing, people unhappy, nobody's tolerating anybody. I mean, it was just, nobody was forgiving anybody for anything. Everybody's finger pointing, critical spirits. I mean, unfair. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It got to where you can't read the news. I noticed I was on CNN on my app, and I noticed I'm finally getting some news stories that are outside the election. You know, so I read Huffington Post, CNN. I got about 9 apps. I got the Yahoo. I mean, you know, anyway, so I get all that. And anyway, so that's good. I can probably start reading the news, maybe. Again, I'm kind of done with it and all that. But I think for the most, okay, look, if we could just lay aside politics, I think there is some hope out there. I mean, because we have a great country. You just have to believe that we can rise pretty much above anything. I did watch a couple of whatever. I'm always interested in some of these things. Jim Brown was always one of my favorite football players. He's an icon in Cleveland. And he's pretty hopeful that Trump may really do something for the inner city. Okay, so he's a little hopeful. Bill Gates seemed to come across after his meeting that he's hopeful. So I think there's some hope, okay? So if we could just put aside these or whatever, maybe there's some hope. I don't know. It's kind of like the Super Bowl. Okay, I would bet my last dollar that the Redskins will not be in the Super Bowl. But you know what? I'm still looking forward to the Super Bowl. I probably won't be as excited if the Cowboys are there, but it is what it is, right? So I'll still watch it and just deal with it, all right? So, sorry. And I'm sure the Cowboy fans feel the same way I am. Would you watch the game if the Redskins were in it, the Cowboys were in it? You would? See, we would. So even though our team doesn't make it, we're still into it and so on. But you know what I notice as I look back over the year? As I look back over the year, if I look at the highs and the lows, guess what I've noticed? A politician's name never got on my list. Now that should give you hope. So don't worry about 2017, you know? Anyway, so I think we probably magnify them a little too much and so on. I don't know. But putting all that aside, hey, let's think about all the things that people deal with. Everybody in this room. Addictions, couples in distress, trauma, unhealthy sexuality, debt, work-related issues, stress of all kinds, which basically means wherever you go, you're going to run into somebody who needs grace. Even if you have to return your Christmas gift, and the line has 27 people in front of you, and the person behind the counter is not happy. I mean, it's just hard. You're like, Well, what a great time of year that the church has to stand out and exhibit grace. And I will just say that God demonstrated grace to 5 people, more than that, but 5 people that we're going to look at in Matthew chapter 1. So what I want to do, I'll give you a short acrostic with the letter, with grace. I'll give you 5 thoughts about exhibiting grace on a regular basis. And this is not always easy, and this is not your first reaction, because we're human and we're sinful. So letter G, give people a break. There was an old commercial, I don't know, about getting a break today or whatever, but everybody needs a break. So here we are, Matthew 1:3, and I've got to kind of get through all this. So Judah, the father of Perez, and Zerah by Tamar. Tamar, now if you know the Bible, you're like, how did Tamar get into the Bible? Tamar? Okay, I don't want you to give me a show of hands, but does anybody have anybody in their genealogy that you don't talk about? In other words, what they did, or what they're known for, you don't talk about them. You don't even bring them up. Okay. Now, if you're Jesus, you know what? He brings them up. Because he's about grace. So here we go. Okay, Tamar. I just got to give you the quick story. Okay, so here it is. So we know from the book of Genesis the line of the Messiah's coming through Judah. Judah had 3 sons. All right, so his oldest son marries this woman by the name of Tamar. Well, he dies. Well, so in that culture, the brother married her. Well, then he died. Well, Judah said, well, that's okay. When the 3rd son gets older, you can marry him. Well, that never happened. Judah never fulfilled the promise. So Tamar said, well, that's fine. I'll get back at him. And so she was, whatever. So she dresses up as a prostitute one day, seduces him, and then he says, well, I don't have any money. She says, well, just give me a pledge, and I'll come. We'll deal with it later. So he gives her something, and then she's pregnant. Well, come to find out, in that day and age, they didn't look too highly on adultery. So she says, well, whoever these are, he's the dad. He was caught red-handed. But Tamar made it into the genealogy. Now, if you were putting the story together, you remember the old Christmas song, Santa been naughty or nice? She was naughty. Cross her name off, right? We're knocking her right out of the genealogy. We're talking about the Messiah. We kind of keep things on the uppity up. It won't look good to have her name. It's not going to look good. That's because you and I understand grace, probably not even that much. And God said, I want the world to know. We're all the human race. They're all sinful. They all have their hurts, their hang-ups, their sins, their whatever. Everybody is welcome through Jesus Christ. That's grace. Everybody can have their sins forgiven. All I'm saying is, because you know what? People mess up. People mess up. People are messy. So last night I go to see, telling on myself. I tell on myself all the time. Y'all know me pretty well by now. Okay, so we go over there. Rachel's had the car trip, and the baby slept the whole way. All right? 7 hours. So she's feeding the baby. She gets done, and so I'm thinking, okay, I'll hold the baby. Right? Before I hold the baby, I'm about from here to this TV. He does, what he just ate, just left. You know what I mean? Just the fountain. Old Faithful just went out. Off. You know what I'm saying? Okay, I'll wait a few minutes while y'all clean it up. So Dan and Carol cleaned it up. And you're thinking, you didn't help. I don't know. It's just weird. Now obviously if it in my mouth, I don't know. I feel like I didn't really have to. I probably didn't exhibit a lot of grace. I'll take him when he's done and cleaned up. You're thinking, how awful. All I'm saying is, we do that to people all the time. And you've had thoughts that you would never share. Am I right? Because you would come across as very ungraceful. Wow. I don't know. All right. Letter R. I've got to get going. Realize no one is beyond God's grace. All right, we looked at Tamar. Let's go to another one in Salmon, the father of Boaz by Rahab. It's getting worse. Okay, Tamar dressed up as a prostitute. Rahab, that was her job. That was her career. A prostitute. So what happened? Israel was going into the promised land, and they got into the city of Jericho. And out, you can read the story in the early chapters of Joshua, when in verse 1, so Joshua sent 2 men secretly to go check out the land, and they went in, they came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. Not the best place probably for 2 guys to hang out. I'm beginning to see that nobody. And of course, she becomes a believer and lives with the Israelites. And, she gets in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Everybody is welcome. Everybody. That's why the Bible says that whosoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Whosoever. That includes everybody. Well, let me get to letter A. Appreciate the ordinary events of life. So now we read about Ruth. So Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed, the father of Jesse. I can't give you the whole story, but Ruth is an outsider. She's from Moab. Now, okay, the Moabites. Really? Okay. So Lot, I've got to go back a little bit in the book of Genesis. So Lot and his family was living in Sodom. And when God decided to judge Sodom, Lot left the city. His wife looked back, turns into a pillar of salt. So Lot is left with 2 daughters. And these 2 daughters are like, we'll never get married now. So they come up with a plan. They get their father drunk. They sleep with him. They get pregnant, and they have 2 kids, and one is named Moab. Quite the history, right? The Bible has all of these events in history. I know some of them look bad, some look good, however you want to write history, but all of these events in history, they're somewhat ordinary because man is so sinful. Well, anyway, that's where Ruth is from, Moab, and she marries a couple from Israel. Long story, you read the book of Ruth, it's only 4 chapters. You can knock it out in 10 minutes. Well, she winds up marrying another guy from Israel, and that's why it lists Boaz, and she winds up marrying him, and then David becomes a great-grandchild, and so on it goes. But Jesus used outsiders. So Matthew, who wrote the book of Matthew? So he was a tax collector. I don't know. Look, for the most part, nobody likes paying taxes. I know. Look, we have to pay taxes, and the Bible says we pay taxes. But don't you get a little tired that your money gets squandered a lot? Anyway, that's another story, and we won't go there, except to say that Matthew was a tax collector. He's an outsider. Why would Jesus even invite him to be an Now get this, and what really gets interesting is there were other guys who Jesus invited who were on the other end of the political spectrum. So you got these two, you got Republicans and Democrats, all right? You got ultra-conservative and ultra-liberal on the same team. Why would Jesus do that? Why would he do that? It's just incredible. He knew something we don't know. We're just not wired like Jesus. But Jesus just knew that if he was going to have the best team possible, and you can read a book if you're interested about Lincoln. It's called Team of Rivals. It's about 600 pages long. It'll take you a while to get through it. And everybody talks about Abraham Lincoln. Well, he just did what Jesus did. Anyway, but all I'm saying is the ordinary events of life. So if you read the story of Ruth, it's just ordinary events of life. Matthew got up, went to work one day. Jesus walks by his booth and says, hey, come join the crowd. Come join my team. Just doing what he normally did. I point that out partly because we're at the end of the year. And I may say more about this next month, but here's what I know. Right now, everybody's getting flooded with, oh, you need this. I'm going to give you the 5 secrets to your best year ever. Okay, whatever they call it. Here's what I promise you. Nobody includes. And if there's one out there and you find it, you let me know. I'm going to be I promise, I'm the only one that will say that has ever, well, I want to say that because you never, whatever. But nobody says or brings up ordinary events. I just want you to go through 2017 just being faithful in the ordinary events, like Matthew. He got up and he went to work every day. Just, nobody's going to tell you that. Oh, you got to have these big, hairy, audacious goals. Matthew didn't have that. Tamar didn't have that. Rahab didn't have that. Ruth didn't have. I'm not saying you should. Those are all good. But let's not overlook. And I'm getting carried away, so I got to go on. All right. But if you want to hear the end, it's coming next month. So I'll see you then. All right. Anyway. One small act by Ruth. And you have to read the story. Got her into the genealogy of Jesus. That's pretty cool. But I must move on. Letter C. Consider the value of everyone. So now let's talk about David. He was the father of Solomon. Listen to this. By the wife of Uriah. Matthew didn't even list her name right there as Bathsheba. Everybody knows it. But you know, at this point, you're starting to think, okay, this is a little kind of overdoing it. It's almost as if Jesus loves everybody the same way. You know how hard that is? That's hard. Now, you have to understand, there's a difference between liking somebody and loving somebody. You can love somebody, but you might not want to play 18 holes of golf with. All right? But you can still love them. And you're going to run into a lot of VDPs in your lifetime. Very draining people. You just are. Have you ever been in the store and saw somebody and you duck down aisle 13? Huh? You just don't want, you're just not there yet. Okay. I admit I have done that, okay? I know you haven't. I'll tell you what. You ever get tired of yourself? Seriously. You ever have an attitude pop in your mind and it just bothers you? I do. Well, it's Christmas. Everybody's expecting something. Now, Carol did say she's giving me a gift, but that's all good. It'll probably be great. She'll come through. I know because she does. She's got a great mind, so she thinks it through, and it'll be the perfect whatever. She figured it out. Um, so everybody's expecting something. But are you expecting God's grace to show up at some point? Are you? I know a lot of times, you have this idea of what you should get for Christmas, but God may have something far different in store for you. Well, I didn't get you that red sweater you wanted. Really, well, I knew what you really needed was this. Oh, you're so right. I didn't realize that. I just wonder, are you expecting God's grace? Many are already saying, look, some people are saying, I hope 2017 is better than 20. Listen, some people had a bad 2016. I think of the guy who won Survivor. I watched a few episodes. The one guy, his mom had lung cancer, and she died like an hour or so after he won. He won the $1 million, but his mom died about an hour or so after he got home. So did he have a great year or a bad year? I think he'd rather have his mom than the $1 million. I don't know. So everybody has a different year. I mean, we're all so, it's just hard to characterize. And one of the hardest things to do is to expect grace. And after all, we know what's best for us. Or do we? So let's talk about one more character. We got to talk about Mary. Mary. When I think about Mary, and I think, if you've noticed so far, I've talked about all women. Christianity elevates women. Always has and always will. It's interesting in our, because we're learning more and more about the Muslim religion and all that, and they don't like women for the most part. In fact, you realize that in the recent bombing in the church in Egypt, where quite a few Christians were killed, that, over there, women sit in a particular place with the children and the men sit elsewhere. The bombs were planted where the women and children normally sit because they don't elevate women and children. You think, that is so odd. Christianity elevates women. So let's talk about Mary and expecting God's grace in your life. So Joseph, the husband of Mary, and actually they were betrothed or engaged, which was like marriage, but they weren't, sleeping together, spending the night together at this particular time. And then she gets pregnant. Many Jewish women, prior to the birth of the Messiah, thought it would be so cool to be the mother of the Messiah. I guess they probably had not thought of the ramifications and how it would all happen and all that. Nobody thought that they could be supernaturally impregnated by God. So Mary is, and when you're a teenager in a small town, you become the picture on every tabloid in the supermarket. It's just the way it is. So she had to go through all that. And she had to walk by the two women in the marketplace who were talking rapidly until she got close, and then they did that. And that went on for some time. And it's almost like, God, why would you do that to somebody? It seems so unfair. Mary was deeply devoted, highly favored, well spoken of, and then this. And I don't have time to go through the the other things and why it had to be this particular way. But actually, that was God's grace showing up in her life. I know, it makes you scratch your head, doesn't it? That felt good. God's grace feels good. Oh, maybe not at the moment it comes. But I do want you to expect God's grace. I want you to expect God to show up. And I don't know how, and I don't know when, but I want you to expect that. And then what if God did the impossible? Everybody's probably got at least one impossible in mind. Just one. What if God did something that was impossible? Well, let me close out with a couple thoughts. I don't want you to miss the grace or the Christmas story, and it starts with accepting God's grace. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. So it starts with accepting the grace of God. The gift of God, which is Jesus Christ. When you get a gift this Christmas, that's grace. Don't pull out your wallet or your credit card and say, do you have one of those little things on your phone? I can swipe it, I'll pay. No, it's a gift. It's a gift. Well, let me come over and I'll shovel your driveway when we get the first snow. No, I don't want you to do that. It's a gift. You can't do anything to get it. It's just a gift. That's grace. You can't do anything to earn your salvation. Nothing. And I think we just saw from the genealogy of Jesus, they didn't do anything. Okay, I know you might say, well, Mary was pretty good and devoted. Okay, but how about the other four? Okay, so you can't do anything. All right? Except accept it. And number two, embrace it. Because His divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness, through the knowledge of Him who's called us to His own glory and excellence. So now that we've accepted it and embraced it, now comes, that's really kind of easy. It's easy. I don't know about you, I had no problem admitting that I'm a sinner. I know some people do, but I certainly had no problem with that. Embrace it. And now comes the hard part. Exhibit it. It almost sounds like, why do you have to keep saying that? Because there is going to come a moment, maybe today. That's the scary part. And especially after you have been here, and it will hit you like a ton of bricks. And you're like, I don't want to right now. I'll do it when it's easier. That's not grace. You just think you are easy to love. And you're not. So how are we going to exhibit it? I've already given you the outline. Give people a break when they don't deserve it. Realize that no one is beyond God's grace. I saw what it was in the news, whatever. It was just a whatever. And somebody went into a place like Starbucks and did something very rude to the barista. And I thought, I wish I could have been in line behind the rude guy. So maybe you'll have an opportunity to see somebody being rude, and you'll have an opportunity to exhibit grace. And I don't know what it would be at that moment. And then just appreciate the ordinary events of life. And you might be surprised where you might have an opportunity to exhibit grace just through an ordinary event. Consider the value of everyone. And I did it last, but at the end of the day, Christmas, I know in a sense is not about you, but I do want you to expect God's grace in your own life. You've already experienced it at some point. Why would you quit expecting it now? It would be so cool if you got the Christmas gift you always wanted. And it would be so cool if God showed up in your life over the next week. Wouldn't it? That would be cool. Let's stand for prayer.